loves, welcome back. We are continuing the Composite Davidson chart series, and today we'll talk about the sun, the light of the relationship. What does it mean if you have the sun in the first, second, third, 12th house? So we go through all the houses, and you can use this for both, for Davidson and for Composite. I've already talked about the differences in a previous video. I can link it below so you can have a look. I do use both charts. I always look at both charts when I do a relationship reading. Always. It's because you get more depth when you look at both charts, because one, for me, the Composite chart gives you a more foundational understanding. It's almost like it gives you a first look. And then with the Davidson chart, I go deeper. So look at both charts when you look at your relationships, and you will get a richer understanding also about the lessons that you are both there to learn through that relationship, right? The real juicy stuff. So let's start with the sun in the first house. The sun in the Composite and Davidson first house is a beautiful, beautiful place to have the sun. One of my personal favorites. The sun in the first is, first of all, you put the relationship first. You also, like people that see you, that you meet, that see the two of you in the relationship, will see the light, right? They meet you, and you too, you shine, right? And people will notice that. In the relationship, your approach to life is very direct, right? There isn't a lot of waiting around and overthinking things. Usually when you have the sun in the first, you also get together fairly quickly. You know, you're not gonna question the relationship. You'll get together fairly quickly, and then you will move the relationship forward fairly quickly as well. And of course, depending on other factors, also depending on how the sun is aspected. You know, if there's a square to Saturn or other squares, obviously that will affect that sun and the way the sun behaves, quote unquote. But generally, the sun in the first house is a beautiful place to have the sun, and it is usually also a very solid relationship when you have that. Yes, specifically when we have it in an earthy environment, right? If you have like an earth element in the first house. But generally speaking, the signs are not as important when we look at Davidson and Composite charts. The house position is more important. So you first look at the house position, and then yes, you may look at the sign that flavors that house, and you know, you get a little bit more out of there. But generally, especially when we talk about the Composite chart, the sign is not that relevant when we describe, or when we come to understand the meaning of the sun in the chart. So when it comes to the sun in the second house, the Composite and Davidson sun in the second house, we look at a couple that is very interested in accumulating material gain and wealth. Doesn't mean they all after money, right? Don't misunderstand me. But it's more a couple that likes security in the physical form, right? Like it's more traditional. Also, we want to have a house. We want to have a, you know, we want this. We want to, you know, we need this. We need a car for you. We need a car for me. There is a lot of materialism in there. But also, what I've noticed in these couples is that the value system is generally solid. Like when it comes to their values, that is something that comes up early in the relationship. It's like, what are your values? What are my values, right? Are we on the same wavelength? Whereas I see that often with couples that have the sun, the composite sun in, let's say, the 9th house. They are much more idealistic when it comes to the relationship. It's a more idealistic placement that is not so concerned with values to begin with, and then sometimes they run into issues later on because they hadn't had their values down. You know, the relationship was based on, you know, something more flighty, something more idealistic, and not on common values. Now, the sun in the 3rd house, composite Davidson chart, is a sun that is it's a relationship that is very let me think, how do I want to say this? It's a social butterfly. These are 2 social butterflies. They love to be out and about, being around other people, but it's also a very mental relationship when it comes to communicating their, like, everything. Like, emotionally, things will always, not always, I shouldn't say that, but things will often brought up to the mental level, and then things will be discussed on a mental plane. And sometimes these couples have a harder time to emotionally connect. They connect really well on that mental level, but the emotional level is sometimes a little difficult to grasp. Of course, if the moon is in the 4th house, then that's a very different story. Then of course that you know, it will be easier for that couple to also, you know, have that emotional connection and being able to bring that in. But generally, yes, very social couple, likes to be out and about. You know, they like to take short trips here and there, going there for the weekend, going there for the, you know, for a quick trip. They like to travel. They like to learn as well. And, you know, they may even go and take a course together and learn something together. It's a very intellectual placement for the sun, but it can work really well. You know, especially if you have the moon in a more solid as the moon is in a more solid placement position, I should say. So now, sun in the 4th house, one of my favorites. Beautiful, 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 beautiful placement. I've experienced that myself, and I don't want to say it was the highlight of all my relationships, but it's just, it's when you can connect on that level. The sun in the 4th house, it's a very, you know, it's the most personal space in a chart, and the intimacy that you create in this relationship, if it's not lasting for whatever reason, you will forever idealize that relationship, no matter what. Even if that relationship broke up, this is going to be a relationship that you will not forget, because of that intimacy that you can create, and the focus, the light of the relationship is in, you know, in that personal space. So you will spend a lot of time one-on-one together. In, you know, a family is going to be super, super important. Doesn't mean that you have to have children. You probably will, but you know, it is not a given. It's not a given. Like, you know, there's no for sure thing with any energy, because energy can play out in different ways, and it can manifest in different ways. But even if you do not have children, this is going to be a tight family unit, and you will feel like you have a family, and you will probably also connect with the partner's family. You know, you will merge in that way. Family will be the focus there in this relationship. Beautiful placement. Now, the sun in the 5th house, composite and Davidson, it's very juicy, but it is it's an intimate on a different level. It's more playful, and it is often short-lived. Doesn't mean that if you and your partner have the sun, if you know, in the fifth house, that you cannot make it last. You can, but you will need some other factors here. Something more stable coming in. You know, you need a good aspect from Saturn in a good position, also the moon in a good position to make this really solid, because the sun in the fifth house is a very playful sun, and it's going to be a very creative relationship. You probably love the arts, both of you, and you like to enjoy the finer things in life, and that's where the focus is, the finer things in life, and that sometimes takes away from stabilizing the intimacy and the personal relationship and building on that, right, the foundation. But it can certainly work, and when you can make this work, it is a wonderful, wonderful relationship that will never get boring, because there's just so much the playfulness and the creativity. It's constantly new. So yeah, it's a beautiful placement, but like I said, I think we need to have a few more solid factors in the chart to make it really ground in and root in, grow the roots in that relationship. Sun in the sixth house is probably one of the more, I don't want to say difficult, but more challenging maybe. Relationship doesn't mean they can't work. They can work beautifully, they work especially well, these relationships, when you have a very traditional approach to relationship, where one is, because it's the house of service, give and take, where one is the giver, the other one, it's like you have to, you really have to have your, need to know your place in that relationship, if you know what I mean. So if you are more, not just traditional, I would say if you're more, I don't want to say anything that can be taken. Well, if you're more submissive and the partner is a more dominant, it doesn't have to be the man that is more dominant. If the woman is more dominant, that can work really well. And I'm not talking about the bedroom here. Not talking about that. I'm talking about general, maybe this would work really well if the woman is a stay-at-home woman and the man is the provider. The woman does the more traditional stuff in the home. I think that relationship can work really well here. But yeah, don't misunderstand me. And I'm not saying the woman has to be submissive and submit to the man completely in this relationship. It's just like, you have to really be aware that there is a power balance in this, or power imbalance, I should say, in this relationship. And, some people like that. Some people like that. Other people cannot handle that at all. Also, obviously, again, you have to look at other factors in the relationship. Maybe there's more lightness coming in through this, Venus placement or the placement of the moon. So Sun in the seventh house in the Davidson and Composite chart, beautiful placement again. I love this placement because it brings in a lot of balance, and it, when we talk about these charts, we talk about the Sun as, the relationship, not as one person or the other, but the relationship. So when we have the Sun in the seventh house, we also look at how does this relationship interact with the other. And there's a lot of solidity here. So this couple really shines when it comes to, relationship with others. There's a beautiful interaction, interplay with the outer world here, with other relationships, There's probably a couple that likes to spend time with other couples. But it can also be a couple that finds a lot of balance just being by themselves. So it is like, you know, it's the natural place of Libra, the 7th house. So balance is a big topic for this relationship. Finding your balance. How do we find our balance in this relationship? And then obviously you have to look at the synastry chart and, you know, the 2 natal charts to look, how do they express their sun? How do they express their sun? And how does that then relate to the relationship sun? So sun in the 8th house, very interesting placement, very intense. That's a couple that will go through, will go down the rabbit hole and explore the darker sides. And we can look at it from the perspective of, you know, a couple doing their inner child work and then growing stronger together. But this can also be a couple that likes the darker things when it comes to the bedroom, right? Again, we have we can have the classical sub-dom relationship play out in this area, different than the 6th house, because in the 6th house we are not talking about the bedroom. We are talking about the day-to-day routine, you know. But in the 8th house, there is, you know, we talk more about the more bedroom intimate stuff that can, and I'm purposely not using the word here because YouTube has a problem with this particular word, so I'm not going to use it, but I'm sure you all understand what I'm talking about. So it can be very juicy. It can be a very juicy placement if you are into it. And we know if you're into it if we, you know, we look at your natal chart or the synastry chart of the 2 of you. That will give us a bit more understanding. So I think it's a very rewarding placement for the sun. But you know, you got to be in touch with your Pluto self, like your Plutonic self. You know, you have to have a good relationship with that part of your own natal chart to really value that relationship and to really utilize what it has to offer. Now, the sun in the 9th house in a composite in Davidson chart is again, very, I think I mentioned that earlier when I talked about the 2nd house, very idealistic placement. I think I compared it earlier when I talked about the 2nd house. I said, 2nd house, you know, you have more solidity, and your values are a given. And when I say a given, they're never a given, but you know, they are more important right from the get-go. In the 9th house, you like to overlook that. And I'm actually, you know, now that I'm thinking about it, being very personal here, that is actually the case. You know, you like to overlook things with the 9th house sun. You're like, oh, yeah, that's fine. I'll be fine with that. He'll be fine with that. And then, you know, 2 years in, you're like, well, actually, no, let's talk about our values now. And then you realize, oh, our values are maybe not matching. So this is a particular good when it comes to friendships. This is a beautiful, beautiful composite sun to have. It can work really well also in relationship. It usually is, the bedroom stuff is fading out or can fade out much quicker. What I want to say here though is that look at both. Look at the composite and look at the Davidson chart, because sometimes you can have sun placement, let's say sun in the 9th house in the composite chart, and then you look at the Davidson chart and you have your composite sun in Scorpio. So you gain a better understanding when you look at both charts, right? So according to the composite chart, your sun might be not as lustful, so to speak. Your sun might be a bit more intellectual, you know, interested in worldly affairs. Let's talk about how we can make the world a better place. Let's talk about religion. That might actually be a couple that where religion is a topic. And that doesn't mean that you are two religious people. It can mean that two religions come together. That was in my case, that was the case. I mean, I don't particularly live in a very religious way, but I have been with someone that came from a completely different religion. And it wasn't a problem, but it was something new and something for both to explore. So yeah, it's a very interesting placement, and it is also a placement that doesn't really get boring, because there's always something new, something will come up always. So it keeps the relationship fresh. But yeah, you have to make sure you find your all the other desires you have. You have to find a way to connect on that level too, because the sun will not push in that area, if you know what I mean. Now, if we have the sun in the 10th house in a composite and Davidson chart, we talk about a very, very strong bond. It's a very strong bond. The 10th house is also the house of, we call it the house of contract. So this is often a relationship that leads to marriage, where marriage is like, it's more a traditional focus here. Also, this relationship is going to be concerned more with the outer world, how they are perceived by the outer world. It's a very ambitious couple, generally speaking, that pursues worldly matters in that way. And again, this is a couple that needs to make sure they also connect on an emotional level, because that 10th house couple can focus too much on the outer world, and not like, it's the opposite of the 4th house couple, where the 4th house couple doesn't really care too much about the outer world. That 10th house couple can sometimes lose intimacy because they are too much out there. They are too concerned with going to the next event together, or going out there and showing up there, looking good together. And if you are into that, and if this is something that is important to you, then the 10th house sun is actually a really beautiful placement for you. So 11th house composite chart is also, again, a very idealistic placement, and that it's a beautiful placement for friendships. I love that for friendships. It can obviously also work in intimate romantic relationships, but especially in long-term intimate romantic relationships, because you need friendship, right? If you stay together for 20-30 years, you want to be friends as well, right? You don't want to just be living side by side, or like, just the bedroom stuff. You want to be friends. So it actually is a really beautiful placement, but you need to make sure that you connect again on that emotional level. You find that you find that as well in your relationship, because the sun in the 11th house tends to also be more concerned with the outer world and the world around us. This can be a couple, for example, that goes and volunteers in Africa together, or somewhere else. It's a couple that is concerned with the state of the world and how to make the world a better place. But that sometimes takes away from growing on an emotional level. Doesn't have to, but I've seen that. I've seen that in relationships. Now, the 12th house sun is a very, very interesting one. And this tends to work really well for people that are personally already very spiritual, right? They, I see the yoga couple, right? Two yoga teachers coming together. That's a beautiful sun to have for these two, because the focus here is the metaphysical more, and this couple really has to make sure they don't lose ground, right? They want to stay grounded on this planet and not just be in their otherworldly sphere. You want to make sure you're still connected to what's going on in this world, and you're here and you're connected to your family. I see that a lot, that this couple is, they often find a new family, you know, in spiritual circles. This is a couple that, yeah, is more concerned with their spiritual growth, and in that world that they are in, everything else, the intimacy they are building is very connected to the way they spiritually grow. So it is a very, you know, it's, when I talk, you probably heard me talk about Neptune, it's a very Neptunian relationship. It's very idealistic, and when you bring these two back into the real world, the quote-unquote real world, you know, the Saturnian world, the world that society, most of society lives in, they tend to have a harder time in that world. They, you know, it's that couple that, you know, just loves living in Bali and, you know, going to yoga, maybe teaching yoga, meditating, you know, living, also if the couple has children, it's generally, they generally bring up children in a, you know, not in the classical way, you know, where they have to go to kindergarten, then to school, you know, they often homeschool. I've seen that. So again, that's just the, you know, that couple needs to remember to have some connection to the world, to the outer world, as well, that they, you know, stay connected, stay rooted, and they don't lose themselves in their bubble, because the fact is they still are on planet Earth, and that bubble can burst, you know, things can happen, and, you know, life can change like this. And if they are not solidly grounded, they, you know, they might lose their connection, because that connection is built in a different way. I'm not one of the astrologers who says, oh no, you cannot make that work. You can make that work. You can. You just have to have the awareness that you might not really see clearly in that relationship. You have to have that in mind. You know, you might have on those rose-colored glasses, and if for some reason they fall off, you know, things can unravel. So yeah, let's finish this here, and I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, let me know. I think maybe the next one should be the moon and through the composite houses. Shall we do that? Leave me a comment below, let me know what you want to see, and I will see you in the next video.